Madam President.
Senator from Michigan is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I want to thank my colleague from Massachusetts for her important comments about a very important, well-qualified nominee. And secondly, I have 4 requests for committees to meet during today's session of the Senate. They have the approval of the majority and minority leaders.
Duly noted.
Thank you, Madam President. Today I rise to speak about a heartbreaking tragedy that far too many American families and communities are familiar with. Americans have learned that gun violence can happen in any place, at any time, in any state, and in any town. This time, the community is Oxford, Michigan, home to about 20,000 people in northwest Oakland County. It's a place with beautiful lakes and bike trails. It's a place where people know each other. It's the kind of place where the neighbors might drop off some Christmas cookies or clear your sidewalk after a snowstorm, since they were doing theirs anyway. And now, it's the kind of place that has been needlessly, senselessly shattered by unspeakable violence. It was a typical Tuesday at Oxford High School, home of the Wildcats. The Oxford Band and Orchestra had recently returned from the trip of a lifetime, performing at Disney World. Student leaders were celebrating a successful Thanksgiving food drive. Almost 5,500 cans of food collected for the local food pantry. And athletes in winter sports were getting ready for Meet the Teams night. But in an instant, everything changed. Everything changed. We're still learning the details, and frankly, that's not what's important. What's important is that thanks to the cold efficiency of modern weaponry, it took mere minutes for a gunman to shatter a community. Thankfully, law enforcement officers showed up within minutes, but still, 11 people were shot. Tragically, 4 students have died, and we hope and pray that there are not more deaths. But several other Oxford students remain in the hospital in critical condition. A typical Tuesday in a typical high school in 2021 in America. Madison Baldwin was a 17-year-old with a beautiful smile. According to her grandmother, she was a kind and patient big sister and an artist. She had already been accepted to a number of colleges. Justin Schilling, also 17, bowling team, and also loved to golf. He worked at Anita's Kitchen, a Lebanese cafe in nearby Lake Orion, where his boss said everybody loved him. Tate Meyer, age 16, and a tight end and running back on the Oxford football team, had recently been honored on the field and in the classroom. And Hannah St. Juliana was just 14 years old. She was passionate about volleyball and basketball. Her teammates said they will never forget her kind heart and her silly personality and her passion for the game. They've dedicated their upcoming season in her memory. Madison, Justin, Tate, and Hannah. 4 lives that were just beginning. 4 losses that have left their families and the community struggling to understand. And we certainly know that Oxford is not alone. This year alone, there have been shootings at 29 schools in our country, 29 schools. From Rigby Middle School in Rigby, Idaho, to Timberview High School in Arlington, Texas, to Heritage High School in Newport News, Virginia. No community is immune. Just ask the grieving residents, the grieving parents of Oxford. This community will come together. They already have. They will hold prayer vigils and deliver casseroles and wrap their arms around these shattered families. But in God's name, why should they have to? High school students should be sharing memories of last month's band trip or celebrating a successful food drive or looking forward to the spotlight of Meet the Teams night. They shouldn't be ducking for cover in their classrooms or fighting for their lives in the ICU because they just happened to be in the wrong hallway at the wrong time. And they certainly shouldn't have their names mentioned during a speech on a floor of the United States Senate. After yet another school shooting in 2021 in America. Madison, Justin, Tate, Hannah, and the more than 100 Americans who were killed by gun violence every day deserve more than thoughts and prayers. They deserve action to keep them safe. And we certainly will focus on this in the days ahead. What I know for sure right now, though, is that we must refuse to settle for a world in which a typical Tuesday turns into such tragedy. My deepest heartfelt sympathies to everyone in Oxford and throughout our state. I share in their grieving of this senseless tragedy. I yield the floor to my partner and colleague in the United States Senate, Senator Peters.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan is recognized.
Madam President, there's no words that can capture the terror and the tragedy of the horrific events that unfolded at Oxford High School on Tuesday afternoon. In a matter of minutes, a routine school day was twisted into scenes of chaos, shattering the safe environment that Oxford High students and teachers and families trusted in. The shocking event will change their lives forever. My heart breaks for every Michigander and American that continues to be affected by this tragedy and so many others like it. It was a scene that has become all too familiar in America. A gunman opened up fire inside a public school, taking 4 young lives and wounding 7 other people. 4 students went to school that morning with bright, exciting futures ahead. They never made it home. Hannah St. Juliana, the youngest victim, was only 14 years old. A freshman who was a promising athlete on the volleyball and basketball teams. Her teammates remembered her as a kind heart, a silly personality, and an absolute passion for sports. Her father remembers her as the happiest kid who had a full life ahead of her before it was tragically cut short. Madison Baldwin, a 17-year-old senior, the oldest of 3 siblings, was preparing to graduate this spring. An aspiring artist and a talented student, She recently celebrated acceptances at several colleges, including some under a full-ride scholarship. She will always be remembered by her family and friends as a kind, smart, and loving girl. Tate Muir was 16 years old, number 42 on the football team, and Tate was a star student athlete and was recently honored with an All-Region Award from the Michigan High School Football Coaches Association. He had already started college recruitment visits and was looking forward to many more until the unthinkable happened. His friends, his family, and his fellow students remembered him as someone who always put his full heart into everything that he did. And Justin Schilling, a 17-year-old senior, was co-captain of the school's bowling team. His co-workers called him an exemplary employee, a devoted friend and a co-worker, and simply an absolute pleasure to be with. As we mourn Hannah and Madison, Tate and Justin, we must also remember the victims who were injured during this attack. At this very moment, dedicated doctors and nurses are working around the clock to ensure that the wounded can swiftly recover. We're all thinking of them and wishing them well, along with those who were wounded, treated, and have now been discharged from the hospital. You know, as a parent, I just simply cannot imagine the grief, the anguish that these families are forced to endure, and the unimaginable pain that parents are feeling, knowing that they can never, never, ever hold their loving child again. You know, I'm grateful for the brave first responders and who quickly responded to this harrowing scene. Thanks to their swift and brave actions, the suspect was apprehended within minutes, preventing even more unspeakable carnage from unfolding. There's no question that the heroic actions of first responders, law enforcement officials, and emergency medical technicians saved lives on Tuesday. We cannot thank them enough. We certainly can't thank the brave men and women for all that they do each and every day to keep our community safe. And for the students and the educators who live through this horrific act, I can only imagine the trauma and the fear that they will spend the rest of their lives with. Children who should have been focused on their math homework, on their reading assignments, spent terrifying moments fighting to survive and to keep one another safe. Reportedly, as bullets pierced classroom doors, students grabbed scissors and calculators, anything they thought they could use to defend themselves. Parents, many of whom received text messages from their children saying that there was a shooting and that they loved them, frantically searched for their children in a parking lot in the aftermath, praying that they would be reunited. The panic, the fear, and the helplessness of being trapped in this nightmare scenario is something that no child, no teacher, and no parent should ever, ever have to face. Now these survivors need our support as they work to process and heal from the shocking and horrific ordeal. To the Oxford High School community, please know that there are millions of Americans who are lifting you up and share in your sorrow. In the days and weeks ahead, we may learn more about the heroic actions that students and teachers and first responders took that stopped this tragedy from being even worse. But the most heartbreaking fact is that this should have never, ever happened in the first place. A school should be a safe place. I was struck by the words of so many students who said that they had been training for a day like this since elementary school. These students and their teachers had participated in active shooting drills. They knew to lock and barricade doors, to hide, to stay silent, and to run. They had heard about other school shootings and where the assailants had tried to trick or lure students into their sights, and they stood strong until they knew they would be safe. And while I'm so grateful that these lessons undoubtedly saved many, many lives this week, I'm also heartbroken that our children and our educators have to bear this burden. There is no easy answer, but it is clear that we must take action. Far too many communities have been devastated by these attacks, and we cannot wait for yet another community to suffer without having tough conversations on what actions Congress should take. The unsettling reality is that our children's lives are at risk when they enter into a classroom, and that is something that we simply cannot tolerate. I know the members of this body have different policy views, but surely we can agree that a school should be a safe place. Surely we can agree to listen to the students in every single one of our states who say that they live in fear that they could be killed at their desk, and have a serious discussion of what needs to change. There is no single solution that would have prevented this tragedy like so many others. But let's have a serious discussion about what needs to change to ensure that warnings reach the right officials and that those officials know what actions to take. Let's have a serious discussion about gun safety issues, background checks, reasonable limits on high-capacity magazines, and closing loopholes that allow dangerous weapons to get into the wrong hands. And let's have a serious discussion about what our schools, our teachers, and our students need to stay safe. Whether it's more access to counselors, strong threat assessments, or more resources, we have to find common ground that will keep our schools safe. We cannot stand by when we know that it is only a matter of time before the next school, the next community, is shattered. For Hannah, for Tate, for Justin, for Madison, for the students, teachers, and families at Oxford High School, and for every student, teacher, and family in the United States, we must act. The time is now. Madam President, I yield the floor.